Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we're joined by a distinguished veteran whose career is a testament to leadership, resilience, and service. Today's guest is Shawn Burnah, who dedicated 3 decades to the Army with 24 years on active duty and 6 in the reserves. Rising to the esteemed rank of Sergeant Major, Shawn's career was marked by significant leadership roles in the Army Infantry and extensive deployments that tested and proved his mettle. Shawn's military journey was characterized by his proactive engagement in numerous critical operations, including leading roles in the airborne community and pivotal work with the Asymmetric Warfare Group. His experiences across various theaters of operations have endowed him with profound insights into the tactical and strategic dimensions of military leadership. After retiring, Shawn faced personal and professional challenges, including navigating life as a single father and overcoming the hurdles of transitioning to civilian life. He channeled these experiences into a second career focused on helping others, earning a master's degree in mental health and wellness, and dedicating himself to the service of his fellow veterans. In today's episode, Shawn will share his rich experiences from the front lines to leadership training, his transitions within and out of the military, and how these shaped his approaches to life and wellness. He advocates strongly for the mental and emotional recovery of veterans, emphasizing the importance of initiating the healing journey early to manage the often tumultuous post-service life adjustments. Join us as we delve into the life of Shawn Burnah, a true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran who continues to lead by example and inspire us with his unwavering commitment to growth and service. Shawn, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, Adam.
I really
That's quite
appreciate
the
it, man.
introduction.
Yeah, man, you earned it, dude. 30 years, and I personally have to say I have a lot of respect for you, man. I was doing my homework on you before we came in to record today. 30 years, Sergeant Major. Notable things like Asymmetric Warfare Group. Didn't get a commission. Operation Hammer Down. You've been around the block a time or two, man, and I have a lot of respect for you.
Oh, thank you.
So let's just jump right in, man. I always like to start like kind of just painting a picture of what life was like for you growing up, kind of what inspired you to join the military, and then we'll kind of move into your military career, some highlights, and then the entrepreneurship piece of all of this. So whenever you're ready, man, take it away.
Yeah, so I grew up in northern New York in the Adirondack Mountain area. Um, and like many kids of that, you know, 70s, early 80s time period, everything was outside, you know. So, yeah, when you sat inside in the 70s and 80s, you were going to be placed on washing dishes, folding clothes, vacuuming floors, and there was already a lot of work. I mean, like I said, northern New York. So at the age of 8, because my father and mother were divorced when I was 8, I started mowing the family lawn, which okay, big deal. It's a 2-acre lawn, and lots of hills and everything on it. So it would take me, and it still takes me when I go up there and hand mow it. Takes about 6 hours. So at 8 years old, pushing a lawnmower for 6 to 8 hours, it starts building something in you. Of course, with my mother doing everything she could to be a positive role model, would be like, "Oh my god, that lawn looks great," and it probably looked like shit because I was 8 years old,
Yeah, but boosting your confidence, right? Like doing the mom thing.
and, and on top of that, I would be out there shoveling snow like, "Hey, I gotta go to work," so, basically, I was doing all the man of the house stuff. I was going out there shoveling snow, um, getting the sidewalk cleared for her, at least getting the end of the driveway cleared so that she could get out, and it it's things that you don't think about that harden you, and, of course, being a good mother, she could turn it into a game, like, "Oh my god, look at you go. You're a machine!" You know?
Yeah, 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 being a mom, so dad's not in the picture for you then.
Right. My father, bless him, he's in another place now. He had a hell of a childhood that when you hear the actual story would, it's one of those things, if you threw all your problems in a pile and you looked at everybody else's, you'd take yours back. Um, and so he had an alcohol problem, and a whole lot of, PTSD from growing up. So there was a lot there for him. It took him years to unpack it. And the thing that I tell people is, even though there was that very estranged, head-butting type relationship with my father, the one thing that man always said whenever he left the area, like if he was going back home or, I was going someplace, "I love you." And, and in the 70s, that's that was different, So, that was him doing everything he could to overcome his monsters. And, you know, that was, even though we'd have just argued, and of course I'd be a little boy and I'd be crying, and he would say, "I love you." And that's something that I like to tell my son every day, is give him a big hug, let him know I love him. And he's 12. And of course, a lot of times, he's like, "Yeah, I love you too, Dad. Back off." you know.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, but it's like you said, it's super important, like, you recognize your dad was having, some issues, but he still made it a point to let you know that his issues weren't because of you, right? Is that kinda what I'm hearing from you? Yeah, and that does go a long way. I remember, growing up. I grew up in, I was born in '85, so I grew up in the early '90s, and a lot like what you were talking about. Me always outside, like don't come outside or don't come home or inside until the from dusk till dawn light comes on, right? Because we lived out in the sticks in southern Indiana with the closest neighbor a mile down the road or whatever on 3.5 acres, and we would, man. We'd play in the ditch, play in the yard. Fuck, I set the yard on fire one year. Like that's just like we didn't play inside, and I totally relate to that. And my parents split when I was young, but that was the one thing that my dad always did was make sure that he knew no matter what that he loved us. Like no matter what was going on, it was always I love you and I'm proud of you. And I totally relate to what you're saying, and I think it's important for the audience to kind of get a sense of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it pays dividends in the long run. I mean, you can hold on to some anger about some issues, but that's something that you can draw from, like a source of strength you can draw from. Um, and so then, once I got to be fourth grade, so whatever age that is, 10 years old, I started wrestling. Um, and, I really love the sport. And then when, so I wrestled from fourth grade up through, basically up through college. Um, and in eighth grade, one of my buddies joined the football team. And I was like, "Hey, how'd you get in the football team?" Like, I didn't know we could, as eighth graders, we could join the high school football team. He's like, "Yeah, you got to go talk to Mr. Morris." And so he laid it out. on the line for me, and so I went in there, did my fitness test, and um, got the evaluation from my phys ed teacher, and went and played high school football, which led to actually I made the varsity wrestling team in eighth grade, um, and the varsity track team. And if you want to talk about, people talk about hazing. Be an eighth grader on a high school a high school wrestling team in the early 1980s, and you will understand what hazing really is.
I'm curious, how did that work? How were you in 8th grade? Because there was a similar situation in my high school. The high school and the middle school were connected. So the middle school where I grew up is 6th, 7th to 8th grade, and then 9, 10, 11, 12 is high school. I know different areas of the country, it's different. 7th and 8th are technically middle school in some places, but our high school and middle school were actually connected at the library. And so we would have a situation where we would have good 8th graders, right? That we could use for the varsity football team because Poseyville, Indiana, North Posey Senior High School, it's tiny. I think my graduating class was like 85 or something like that. So how did you end up, an 8th grader on the football team? Was it a situation like that?
Uh, well, again, it was I tried out. I'd never played football before, other than out in the sandlot type, in the backyard type football. Uh, and I tried out, and because again, it's a small school, and so they were like, "Yeah, we got extra pads and we got extra uniforms, so yeah, bring them on." Um, and then when I tried out for the wrestling team, it was kind of, we'll see. And then I out wrestled the other guys, because I had from fourth grade on in experience. So that's when I made the varsity team. And, there was, I want to say there was any, you know, condemnation of the situation. However, there was the naive eighth grader aspect of it, when, the seniors like, hey, go do this, kind of like, like a private, hey, go get a box of grid squares.
I was just thinking that, right? Like I remember I showed up to my first unit on October 10th, 2003, which was the third ID, and those guys had only been home from the invasion for like maybe 2 weeks, like with leave in there. So,
Right,
and I know with 30 years of experience in the army, you remember those. So the BDU days, we didn't have flags on our uniforms unless you went to combat. Remember
right.
remember that? And so I'm in an infantry unit, no flag, no combat patch, no CIB. Man, like you said, talk about an 8th grader being hazed on a varsity team. It's
Come here,
like,
Cherry.
yeah, be a private in an infantry unit after they come home from a war, that hasn't happened. Oh, yeah, I totally relate.
But I wrestled, and then that then I ran track, and of course a lot of the guys that were on the wrestling team were on the track team. So by this time they know me, and there was no more shenanigans. Um, because I'd held my own on the wrestling mat for the varsity team, so there was it's kind of like uh, you're still an eighth grader, but there's a new level of respect for your abilities and your work ethic.
For sure. I think that's the one fun thing about wrestling too. So I wrestled from before kindergarten all the way through my senior year of high school. And kind of my downfall was I just didn't grow fast enough when I got to high school, wrestling 152, 160, 171, and 189. Like those hard weight classes where you just got dudes who are yoked because they they got their testosterone and shit early. But, I think wrestling is also awesome because sometimes it really is about technique, right? Like doesn't matter what your size or your strength is if you've got a good foundation and technique. So I totally get why you're an 8th grader on a varsity wrestling team whooping some ass, right? Because you just perfect that craft over, what is that? 4th grade to 8th grade, 5 years essentially.
Right. Yeah, and and I understand the whole. I grew up in, like I said, in the northern New York at the time. You were either most of those boys were either farmers, so you know they were wrestling, so there was less work to do on the farm, or they were the sons of lumberjacks. So again, less work because They're not out there having to throw 4-foot logs all night long. So hey, what better thing than, hey dad, I'm gonna wrestle. All right, that's cool. So anyways, I joined the army. My father had been a corpsman for the Marines during the Vietnam era. Um, and like most boys, it was pretty intriguing to me. Um, and my mother was a nurse in the reserves, which at that point in my senior year, the last thing I wanted, because my mother had this idea that I should be a doctor, and anybody that really knows me, someone who's walking around holding something and whimpering and crying, you know, I'm more of the person that smells blood than the person that's going to be like, "Oh my God, let me help you."
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
now when it's my son, it's a different story. Like, hey, you know, but when I see another grown man, like, oh, my leg hurts, I'm like, you know, hey, dude, that's great. I remember I got my foot run over by a tractor when I was working on the farm and having to go out and split wood that night. Like, okay, yep, you got your foot run over, big freaking deal. Go get the wood.
Yeah, it was a situation like are you hurt or are you injured? Because there's a difference, right? Like, yeah, no, I totally get that. So originally you were interested in being a forest ranger or some kind of athletic training, right? And you mentioned, in previous conversation that your parents kind of, you know, had a big role in your decision to either join the military or go to the forest rangers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I I had wanted to be a forest ranger. That was my number one goal. Once I got to be high school level, I had done really well in biology classes, um, and forestry was what was drawing me in, and that was a, a point of contention when I started my senior year, and my mother had this dream of me being a doctor, and I had a dream of being a forest ranger, and um, there was a lot of arguing and late night, you know, arguments between her, me, and my stepfather, because like most parents of the '80s, they knew best, or so they thought. Um, and so I originally joined the Army Reserves as a medic and absolutely despised it.
What
People,
about it?
again, because people were injured, and you know, and a lot of it was self mutilation, basically. You know, um, guys coming in with their teeth rotted out of their head. Hey, my teeth hurt. What do you got for me? I got sympathy, dude. Go brush your teeth. I don't know what to.
I love that, man. That's so good. Because it's true. It's like, well, what are you doing to take care of yourself right now? Like, this is beyond what I'm capable of helping you
Yeah,
with at
it's a
this
different
point.
story. Like, hey, you know, I went to go clear a vehicle in the motor pool. The fan belt blew off and caught me in the mouth and knocked out my teeth. Okay, legit.
Yeah, right, right. Like I was walking by I was the gunner on a Humvee, and we hit a bump, and I smashed my face on the turret. Right, like
Right,
now I'm missing some teeth. Like, okay, there's a reason you're missing some teeth.
right. Um, and so in that end, it was a reserve unit, and there were some very large individuals.
Mm,
And so every month, old PV2 Burnah was out there wrapping a tape around a guy who weighed over 300 pounds and had just gotten done a PT test, so was sweating profusely and, was worried about passing his tape test now. Yeah, and of course, I'm
not
the one
passing that
holding
one.
him back, supposedly. Uh,
because you just read the number off of the tape measure. Like, I was bigger my whole career, so I always had to go through the tape test, and I would have some leaders every now and again that would look at me like, "No way, you're passing tape," and it's like, dude, my neck is 19 inches around. Like, I'm gonna pass the. I'm just a big dude, you know. But 300 pounds in the reserves, I can't imagine that. And you were in the reserves before you went to active duty, correct?
right. I was in the reserves while I was going to college.
You were going to college, and I have a lot of people that I led while I was in that got out, went to the guard or the reserves, and like were begging to come back to active duty, particularly from the infantry, because they're like, I can't handle this. Like, it is bad down here. So I think it's cool to hear your perspective of joining the reserves first and then switching to active duty, because it seems like you felt the same way that these other guys coming from active duty to the guard and the reserves feel when they leave a regular infantry unit.
Right. And and so then, the whole point of going to college was to get commissioned in the Army, which I got commissioned, and it was right at that point of time where they were basically, hey, in '87 when I started college, they were like, hey, yeah, everybody, all our guys get active duty because of the training that we got here. I was going to a military school. It wasn't West Point; it was Norwich
It was
University,
Norwich, right?
right?
Yeah.
And so they were, hey, you're going to get an active duty commission as long as you pass everything. Well, then after the Gulf War, the Army started drawing down. And so they were like, hey, we don't need as many lieutenants as we needed before. And so they cut the bottom off, and I was on the bottom because I was having too much fun in college rather than, doing a whole lot of studying.
That's a pretty typical story.
And which 2 years later they were, hey, we need some of that year group 91 guys to come back. So I got commissioned, did my mandatory, commissioning program, and then
Like a
after that,
OBC or whatever.
right,
Yeah.
I was to ILBC. Then after that, I was like, hey, you know what, dudes, peace pops and polka dots. I'm not doing this reserve thing. I'm either in or I'm out, you know. And so then, I came in and joined the infantry and got got to my first duty station.
So did you resign the commission then? Did you actually finish college and then go active duty, resign the commission? So are you coming in as an E4 because you have a degree, or
Right,
how
I
did
came in
that
as an
look? Okay,
yeah.
so
So it was a reserve commission, and so I did the active duty for the training. But then as soon as it was done, I dropped it and enlisted. Um, but yeah, I came in as a specialist, and the whole premise was, well, I'm going to go in there and I'll just go through OCS and get an active duty commission that way.
it don't work like that,
And
does it?
well, it doesn't work like that when you see what officers are actually doing on active duty. When you know, besides that glorious PL time, which they sell you on, you're like, hey, these guys do like 8 months to a year of PL time, and then they're sitting behind a desk.
For the
And
rest of their career,
right,
basically.
and they're
Yeah.
stressed the fuck out. And I'm like, yeah, no thanks. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. You know, I'm looking at my NCOs, and like these guys are hustling all day long and working. I'm like, yeah, this guy's talking about, hey, I need a break, I need staff time because I've done 20 years, in the infantry. So I want some staff time. I'm like, yeah, I'd rather be asking for a break than asking to be busy, physically
And
busy.
for those, if I want to stop you there for a second and explain to the audience. We actually have a lot of civilians that really appreciate this show because they get a lot of insight into the military because they didn't join for whatever their personal reasons are, and they're fascinated by this stuff. And I want to kind of break this down with what Sean's talking about here. So, when you come in as an officer, you take a PL job, platoon leader job, as a second lieutenant. Usually, they'll get promoted to first lieutenant in that job, and Sean said, it's what 8 to 16 months, really. I don't know. It just depends on kind of what's going on in the army at the time. You would basically a year is your PL time. Then you leave, you go become a company XO, so you're behind a desk. Then you do that for what, like 2 years
Yeah,
as
a
an
year or
XO.
two, depending on how busy they, what's going on.
Yeah, and so after that, usually they'll make captain, and then they'll take a company, and they'll have a company for two. Is it 2 years still?
Yeah, well, usually after once they make captain, then they go up to the S3 staff or one of the
That's
other
right.
staffs.
Yeah, to wait for their company command. So they're still behind a desk for another year or two, and then they'll take command. And then after that, they don't take command of soldiers again until they're a lieutenant colonel, correct? Yeah, so kind of to try and just shape the leadership piece of an officer's life versus an enlisted guy, you're basically a leader. Shit, I was a PFC team leader just because of when I came in, right? So you can be a leader, I've seen
Whenever
even
they
eat.
put you in.
Yeah, and you don't really stop leading soldiers kind of ever. I mean, you just kind of get more removed. For me personally, I thought that kind of happened at first sergeant level, where you're really more focused on beans, bullets, and barracks than you are on leading men in combat. I think that kind of stops at platoon sergeant, but you won't make first sergeant until 16, 17, 18 years in the Army. So, you're around Joe and leading Joe for a lot longer than these officers are. And I just want to kind of explain that to the audience.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, then after that, it became. I mean, I got to my first duty station at the 101st, and the after the first field problem, our sergeant major walks out and says, "Hey, I got 6 slots for ranger school. Who wants to go?" And
Here's
so
Burnah.
me and two of my buddies were all in the same platoon. Well, we'll go. And sergeant major like loses his shit. He's like, I got all these NCOs that aren't ranger qualified, and I got 3 specialists who all want to go. All right, you three come here. And then, so we all went to ranger school and graduated. Um, and then after that, as soon as we got back, we all split up. Like I went over to 101st Pathfinders, um, and one of my buddies went. He PCS somewhere. I forgot. Another guy went to the 10th Mountain. So we all split up about within a year of graduating. But that right there was like that was my ranger school at that time. That was like your graduate degree.
Yep.
Like you
I
just
think it still really is largely in the infantry. Without a ranger,
probably.
I don't have a ranger tab. I never had an opportunity to get one. I was deployed every other year. It's just kind of how my career went, but it was definitely, I thought it was going to be the one thing that was going to hold me back from making E7 for sure.
Yeah, and I got that, and that just opened up all the doors for me.
So Pathfinder school went away shortly after I came in. They kind of stopped sending people to the school, I think. So you have pretty much everything that a traditional infantry, army infantry enlisted guy would have had, right? So I
Right,
assume air assault, airborne, ranger tab, pathfinder, CIB, EIB. You've got it. You've just
right.
all of it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if I was under my game plan was whatever was offered to me, I was going to take, and whatever wasn't offered to me, I was going to pursue. And I thought about going the SF route, and it just to me it just wasn't in my calling, um, you know. And so then after I left there, and after I left Fort Campbell, I went over to Italy. As soon as I got to Italy, deployed to Bosnia. Um, before we were in Bosnia for 2 or 3 months, and then the unit came in from Germany to relieve us, and all the papers started reading, "First Americans arrive in Bosnia." We're like,
You're like, we've been there.
right,
I was just there for 3 months.
because we were there like right after the peace accords were signed, so we're out there on our bellies, like, you know, probing for mines, which,
It's awful. It's
right,
so bad.
and
I hated
especially,
that part of training.
it was also December in Bosnia, so you know, there's snow on the ground, and you're you don't really know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I didn't have the fortune to talk to a lot of guys who served in Bosnia when I was in, but I actually heard a lot of stories about Bosnia. There was a lot more going on than I think a lot of people realize, at least from like an infantry, like doing your job standpoint.
Right.
I thought Bosnia was just kind of like I don't know, a peacekeeping mission or something. I was also really young when that was going on, right? Because that's the mid 90s, right? And I would have been 10, if you say 95. So I didn't really understand it. So, was there quite a bit going on over there? Like, were you, other than probing for mines, like I've heard there was some actual combat going on there.
Um, there there may have been on the higher tiered units, some. Um, we never saw anything. Uh, I'll be honest. Like, the only time you ever heard a gunshot was an accidental discharge from a private. Um, you know,
Some things never change.
and you know, but we would be out and we'd be patrolling, because we'd go out and do presence patrols through the town. Um, and you'd have these old women just, they'd be walking by and all of a sudden they just come running over and start hugging everybody in the platoon. Just extremely thankful that we were there. Um, but yeah, the hardest part of Bosnia was making sure that you just didn't step off the road because, I mean, there were
There's
mines
mines
that were found.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then so we came back from there, and then within a month or maybe 2 months, we went down and relieved the 5th Special Forces, not 5th, was it 5th? 10th Special Forces Group was down at the Liberian embassy securing that, and we went down there and relieved them. Uh, and that was that was probably the most interesting deployment I've been on.
Okay. So for the audience, you have been on 9 total deployments, I
Right,
believe. So
9.
9, and that's going to include Liberia. That's going to include Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere else you went, correct? So so 9 deployments. I don't, for those who aren't familiar, over a 30-year career, I mean, I did 4 in 12 and a half. So I was deployed every other year. I think 49 or 50 months total combat time is what I have. 9 deployments is like unheard of in a traditional infantry unit. Like, guys just don't make it that long. Their bodies break, their mental health typically fails. So you're demonstrating some extreme resilience, right? I have in my notes here that you made it to the 10-year mark before you even made a decision to stay in for a career, right? And was it kind of during that Liberia deployment, almost right around that time period, that you made this decision?
Uh, mm, Actually, during during the Liberia experience, that was one of the things where I was like, what if I became a war journalist? You know,
So you wanted to get out and go write about war instead of just fight war.
yeah.
This is okay. This is interesting. I like this.
And so I was like, um, it was one of those things like, is this what I want to do? I don't. It, Being in the war part of it wasn't the problem. It was for when I started thinking about it, I was like, I've got no means to defend myself other than a camera. And that was the big, like, okay, let's give that up. because I could just imagine going into Iraq and Afghanistan a few years later with nothing but a camera, you know,
And there's
winging a
some
prayer.
incredible documentaries out there from some brave men and women who've put some embedded themselves with some army units in the mountains of it. It's yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm curious. Are you a writer? Is that something that you've just always been drawn to? Because that's kind of a weird, to go from an infantry guy kicking indoors, shooting people in the face, patrolling, digging for mines, sweeping floors, cleaning bathrooms, right? Like it's all encompassing to being a war journalist. Like that's a pretty stark transition, I would think.
Uh, the being a writer, I'll be I'm okay at writing. Um, I I have a tendency because I got a minor in literature when I was in college, so I have a tendency to get flowery, and that sometimes it pays off, and sometimes people are like, "Hey, what the fuck are you saying?"
Right? Yeah. No, I get it. Totally.
Um, so yeah, so that was after Liberia, but Liberia was like watching war on TV. It really was. So you'd sit in the embassy and you'd see a group of people run out from the right, and somebody from the left would start shooting at them. So now you got the left and the right, and you don't know who is who because they're all in civilian clothes. You know, obviously they know who is who, and we'd be watching this. And at first, we thought it was a joke. Like we're gonna go to secure the Liberian embassy. Okay, then they're like, it's the National Front of Liberia versus the Associated Front of Liberia or whoever. All right, the NFL versus the AFL. All right. Uh, oh, and the head of the NFL, his name is Charles Taylor. You know, Chuck Taylor
Oh,
shoes.
Jesus.
And then the
Here
other
we
guy.
go.
And so we're like, all right, this is an injury. We're gonna pack up. We're gonna fly around in an airplane, jump into Hohenfels drop zone in Germany, do a quick hit mission, get on a bus, come back home. Yeah. And next thing you know, we're on a C-17 or a C-5. We're flying and flying and flying. It's like, damn, this is a long flight. And then they open that back door and it's 120 degrees and 100% humidity. You're like, yep, they were telling us the truth. So yeah,
So, so you get done with the Liberia deployment, and I assume things probably got pretty quiet for a while until 9/11. And kind of where were you when 9/11 happened? I was a sophomore in high school, so I remember it distinctly because I had gone upstairs getting ready for school. My grandmother lived with us at the time, and she had turned on the news every morning, and she's like, "You're going to want to see this." So, what are you doing? I've had the pleasure of serving with some great people who were in the Army on September 11th, and they said they'd never seen anything like it army wide. Like the whole army basically shut down, and like nobody had any clue what was going on. Just flipped everybody's heads upside down, basically. So, can you kind of like paint that picture for us?
so I was at the time I was a sergeant first class, and I was an observer controller down at JRTC.
At Fort Polk.
Right.
Ugh. Sorry,
And
brother.
so we were prepping to we were doing I forgot the name of them, but basically we were doing mission MREs, that's a mission rehearsal exercise for guys going into Kosovo. And so I forgot what unit it was, but they're training, and this Captain Baker comes over. He's like, "Hey, Shawn Burnah." I was like, "Yeah, like what's up?" Because I was listening to an operations order. He's like, "Hey, plane just flew into the World Trade Center." I'm like, I'm thinking, you know, some high school, college kid rolling around in a Cessna got blown off course, or got cocky and ran into it. Well, okay, yeah, and then yeah, I just kind of disregarded him. And he's like, "Hey, Shawn Burnah, another plane just hit the other tower. Now I'm like, oh, like what the fuck? And of course, this was all text messages that he was getting from his his wife or his girlfriend or whoever. And
And I assume not a lot of people had cell phones
no,
then
I
either,
didn't have a
right?
cell phone.
Of course. Yeah, it was you were balling if you had a cell phone back
Yeah,
then.
and it was one of those things like I don't have one, and nor do I want one.
Right, of course.
You
Until the
know,
army forces me, they'll issue me one when I have to have one.
right? And so then after that second one hit, like it just everything ceased, and like the unit basically flipped all their screens that they could from from
Anything
mission.
going on in the world
Right,
to
right.
everything in the Middle
Everything
East.
just got focused on the World Trade Center. And then you started hearing the stories, of the plane in Pennsylvania, the one that hit the Pentagon.
Is there like this rage that's starting to build in you? Like what were you feeling like when you realized, okay, this is serious, this is real, right? Like,
Uh, for me, it wasn't so much a rage. It was, maybe it was. I mean, we're talking a long time ago, and a
of course,
whole
yeah,
lot of
and I'm trying to
emotions
think
will
back
go.
that far for myself too,
Um,
right? Like, I was a kid.
right. I mean, I think for me, and I was older, so at the time it was more like, oh, like what the fuck is going on? You know, not so much a rage as more of a question, like what's really going on? Like, you know, because at the time we didn't really know. They didn't know who anybody was. Like was it? We didn't think anything of the Middle East or anything when we first started watching it, and so there was a whole lot of question. Like, was it? Obviously, it was on purpose. And
Right? Like that's the one clear fact that we know. Like this wasn't an accident.
right. And so after that, it it became more of a for me, it was more like, "Hey, let's go stick our thumb in their eye," you know? Um, and it it also enhanced that desire to be better.
Yeah, totally understand. And it's interesting too because by this point, for all intents and purposes, you're on the back half of your career. You're a sergeant first class, so you've made E7, right? You're preparing, to lead bigger groups of men into combat, and so I assume you're preparing, looking at E8 and what that looks like, and how for you I noticed, I was in from '03 to 15, and I noticed the Army changed a ton. So, how much did the Army change from, what you knew before 9/11 and then after 9/11? Because I always tell people it's a good thing I was medically retired when I was because I would have made a terrible garrison soldier. I didn't ever practice the garrison skills that are required of an NCO because I was always a combat leader, always, right? I was always gone. So there was never any focus or, intention put on counseling statements and, board packets and all that because there just wasn't time. We had to train to deploy. So how much did you see and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise, because you were part of a unit that was stood up specifically for dealing with the global war on terror in the Asymmetric Warfare Group, right? That's what I'm to understand about Asymmetric Warfare Group, which doesn't exist any longer or has, yeah. So that I'm kind of trying to paint a picture of like how everything was done before 9/11 and then how much the Army in particular, because it's what you and I can speak to, really shifted focus to, oh yeah, we're going to be in war for a long time. Like it was very apparent to me when I came home from my first deployment on like January 10th or 11th, 2005, and I had orders, paper orders in my hand for 11 months to the day later I was going to be on another deployment,
Right.
you know?
So the big difference for the Army, 'cause like I said, I came on active duty in '93. Um, training was much more intense prior to 9/11. So we would go out to we were, it was basically as an infantryman, your job was, to punch people in the face and take their name and go forth and do it to another person. So we would go out to the field for 45 days straight. And, there was no showers. It, it was, you were just living out in the field for 45 days. The whole time you were doing live fires, blank fires, crawl, walk, run, crawl, walk,
Yep.
run,
Dry blank
you know,
live. Oh yeah.
and you
Day and night.
do that for 45, and then, somewhere in between there, you do what we used to call a movement to daylight. It was supposed to be a movement to contact. So you're walking for like 2 or 3 days, just patrolling, and some you might run into some op four somewhere, and you'd be engaged for like half an hour, and then you'd pick up your ruck and start moving again. So I mean, um, training was longer. It was more physically intense. I mean, there was no like, hey, we need to get these guys home to mama so that they can be with their families. It was like, hey, you got a family? Well, it's gonna suck for you. Yeah, it was a different mindset. Um, and then once we got into the war on terror, we started after 9/11. It was kind of like the cogs of the army machine were gummed up. Like they didn't really know what to do. It was like, okay, yeah, we know we cried havoc, let slip the dogs of war, and they went in and they went forth and conquered. But what do we now? We've got this thing. What do we do with it? And that was, I think, the whole war in Iraq could have been handled so it wasn't a long, drawn out process within that first year. And when they took all these people who had gone in, we'd gone in there with the whole intent and purpose of destroying the Iraqi army. Then they're like, all right, sit still. You know, we just got you guys. We turned you into rabid dogs, and now we want you to be lap dogs.
I can remember that because I told you, the third ID basically led the charge into Baghdad to the airport through the Karbala Gap and all that. And I remember being a private in my first unit listening to those guys, and it's like it was great. We staged on the border of Kuwait. We drove the Bradleys up to Baghdad, killed a bunch of people along the way, being infantrymen, doing our jobs, and then we get to the airport and we just sat there with no idea when we're going home, no way to contact home. And speaking more to how the army changed, I remember my first training cycle before my first deployment, 45 days in the field, conventional warfare tactics in the box at NTC, right? Just regular training. And then I think back to all the other training rotations after that, and it really changed, to more guerrilla warfare, village stability operations type stuff. NTC is now building cities so that you can do mass cal events because of IEDs and everything. And it's cool to get to talk to somebody else who obviously has way more experience with the army before, what the training was like, and then gets to see it, through 20 years of war, because you were even, I mean, you didn't even get out until after I had gotten out, right? So you got out in 17. I was retired in 2015. It's incredible to get to talk about this stuff and kind of relive it. And like, it's almost like I couldn't believe what I was seeing in the changes of the army, from the way they would structure regular infantry units to, the training cycles to the people that they would even put in to the infantry, man. And it got bad. It got to, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And you dealt with it on a much larger level because by that time you're probably a first sergeant or a sergeant major. And you got these dudes coming in from basic training during the surge who can't pass push-ups. You're calling your drill sergeant buddies and they're like, yeah, man, the army just tells us, get them to the unit. We just need numbers, and you're like, this is what is going
Yeah.
on here.
Oh yeah. So yeah, and so I was in the 173rd, who was, they jumped into northern Iraq, and I ended up I was actually on an airplane. I had gotten orders to Italy. I was on an airplane flying into Italy as the 173rd was jumping into Iraq. And because my my significant other at the time, she's like, "Hey, are you going to be going to Iraq?" You know, we're watching it on the screen. I was like, "No." I was like, "Third ID's going up." I was like, "173rd." They're not mentioning 173rd whatsoever. All right, we get off the plane. We land in Aviano, Italy, and all across the screen, 173rd makes a historic landing, historic airborne assault into northern Iraq. So I was like, "Well, babe, I'm probably gonna go." Um, you know, and so then a
Yeah.
couple months later, I deployed over there and took over a platoon as a platoon sergeant.
Where at in Iraq?
So we were in Kirkuk,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then we started patrolling all over that area. So we were setting up safe houses in Alaweja, um, Twos, places in between. I think
I remember doing all that down in the Iron Triangle, Lucifia, Codicea, all that. Yeah, everything. Yeah. There's not probably, I did 3 to Iraq with the third ID. They even moved me to send me on the third one. And I just remember, like, by the third one, we were playing QRF for all the civilians who were log packing or whatever it was. And we were all over that country. As soon as the sun would go down, you could guarantee we were going to get a call, and we would drive hours and hours and hours to go clean up a mess. Again, maybe a little firefight here or there. Not really. The ROE was so stupid by that time anyway that it was like, but yeah, it's crazy. So your first to Iraq, how many did you do total in the global war on terror?
so. Global War on Terror was 7.
7. So how many to
So
Iraq?
I did 4 to Iraq, um, 2.
All 12 months?
So 2 were 12 months. One was 6 months, and another one was 4 months.
Okay, so 32 months in Iraq. And then how many did you do, or excuse me, 34 in Iraq? How many to Afghanistan?
2 in Afghanistan, and then
And were those 9
12
months or
months.
12? 12
Right.
months? Jesus Christ, dude.
And
It's
then
insane.
1 3 months to Lebanon. Um,
Jesus Christ. So how many did you do? I'm trying to understand because I don't re- really understand what the asymmetrical warfare group is. I just kind of associate it with more of like a special operations type unit instead of a conventional army unit. So I want to understand, were you with asymmetrical warfare when Operation Hammer Down
no,
happened?
I was not.
Okay, so you were with a conventional
Right.
unit
I
at
was
that
with the
time.
25th. And being on Operation Hammer Down was what attracted me to the Asymmetric Warfare Group.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I found the Operation Hammer Down. It was a PDF I found online through a Google search of your name doing my research, and I was captivated, man. So, talk to us about Operation Hammer Down because I feel like that was a pretty significant moment in your career and kind of led to some future decisions that you made in your career,
Right.
correct?
So I was a first sergeant for what they called the FTF, Focus Targeting Force, which we were so that the regular infantry units would go out and they would pick the low hanging fruit, and the tier one units, the special forces, the rangers, they would go out and they would pick the high hanging fruit. Well, that was all well and good, but the problem was that middle layer of the cake, nobody was really after, and that's what the focus targeting force was we were going out and we were picking that middle layer of cake, because when you pulled that middle layer of cake, that got the guys on the bottom moving and the guys on the top moving, because there's nobody in between them. So now they've got to find, and that was like the genius of it. And so we worked with the Asymmetric Warfare Group and how they were basically giving us enhanced training. Um, and like you just met really awesome people there. Um, the guys I met, I had nothing but good stuff to say about them. I mean, everything. They're professional soldiers. Um, they were former SF guys. Uh, our Rangers. So they were all good dudes and very knowledgeable. Um, and so working with them really like, hey, these are some good dudes, and they all want to be here. Which, as you know, when being around other people that want to be there,
It just makes everything so much. It makes the team so much tighter. Like just everything. I remember that very much about Apache Company 123 Infantry, who I went on my one Afghanistan deployment with. That was the most solid infantry company I had ever been in because everybody just wanted to be there. You wanted to be in that company. You wanted to be in that platoon. It was totally get what you're saying because it really does make a
and
difference.
I hadn't, I I had experienced several times where that had happened. My first time was when I went over to 101st Pathfinders. You had to try out for the unit. You had to actually, you know, pass everything they wanted you to do. And the thing is, in in the Pathfinders, every day was tryouts. So there was if you went downtown and got liquored up and got in trouble, well, guess what, dude? You know, out with you. I don't have time to deal with troublemakers. We're on a mission here to make a good name for ourselves and do good things for the army. And so I mean, every day was tryouts. You're around people that were extremely professional, and that was something. Then I went over to Italy from there, um, and it was, hey, you're coming to the scout platoon. And I was like, okay. So I went over to the scout platoon, and again, you're only in scout platoon because you want to enhance your path in the army, and you're around other people that want to be there and want to be really good.
And the scout platoons that I saw, it's always every day is a tryout. Every day. Yep.
And so, I went to scout platoon. Then after that, I went to JRTC, which you can sham or you can shine. It's it was one of those places. Um, and then I went back to Italy for the for the war on terror because like 2003 I went back, uh, got a platoon, and I mean my platoon leader at the time was a special forces guy. So he was a former master sergeant in special forces. So you know we we
I'll never understand why you get to E8 and then like I think it's a good idea to start the fuck over. Let me go get a commission. Like I can't I had a couple of good officers in the army that had done that, made it to E7, E8, and then were like, I think I'm gonna try something different and just start over. And I'm like, dude,
well
no.
I think
Like, no,
I
thank
think
you.
with some of those guys it's they finally get their degrees, because they're hustling for their degree over the years, and it takes a while because of the duty. But I mean, the, we we did really good together. Um, and the thing is, like, we had a situation which would take like hours to discuss, but I'll just leave it as he did something and he was supposed to give me information and he failed to give it to me. And I got my ass chewed by the first sergeant for doing it. And I went in and I lit him on fire. And I was like, you know what? I don't give a fuck what you were before. I'm treating you like a goddamn cherry lieutenant from now on. You fucking understand me, LT? And, so we were like in each other's faces, screaming at each other, and the whole platoon's like, what the fuck's going on? You know what I mean? And so the next day, I went in to a meeting. That I was the only platoon sergeant in the meeting. It was a platoon leader meeting. I was like, I need to make sure you're fucking taking notes, LT. It just, just he was madder than hell. And I was like, I don't give a shit. It's like, we're gonna. This is what's going on. You screwed up once, you lost my faith. So no sooner does the meeting start, like, the company commander starts talking. He's like, why are you here? I was like, because I'm here. And, you know, so the meeting starts, and it's my weapons squad leader. It's like, Shawn Burnah, we need to talk. I'm like, dude, I'm in a meeting. And first on, first on, it's like reading the room. He's like, let's go outside. So we go out. And he's like, I just want to talk to Shawn Burnah. He's like, no, you got to talk to me too. What the fuck's going on? And so Worley was a former Ranger Regiment dude, and my weapons squad leader turns and goes, well, first sergeant, uh, we just had a PV2 that got to the platoon today that was practicing magazine changes in his chew, and had an AD with a saw. And I'm like, and of course it was like, all right, I was like, anybody hurt? They're like, no, but you need to look at the situation. And I'm like, so I go in, we go over to where the area is. We look at his chew, and I'm like, and my weapons squad was like, yeah, go check it out. Go over, and where my desk was, where I normally sat at that time of day to do my daily logs and everything else, all the paperwork I had to take care of, had a 6 to 9 round burst right through it.
Ooh, lucky you going to that meeting because your lieutenant pissed you
Right.
off.
And that was the day I realized there was a God, and he was moving me for a reason, because that was the only time I ever lost my temper with my LT. You know, Before that, anything happened, it was, calm and cool. After that, anything happened, it was calm and cool. But that one time, like, and it wasn't even that big of a deal. It was like, it was just, it sent me over the top. And
Well, it's like had that not happened, you would have been sitting in that chair, very well not be having this conversation with me right now. That's interesting. So your time on Operation Hammer
oh,
Down
sorry, yeah. So
influenced you
hammer down.
heavily. Yeah, no, you're good, man. No, this is great because like this is the important stuff, right? Like this is what shapes you on your journey, and we're getting to the difficult part here very shortly, which is the transition. And I imagine transition was not easy after getting to Asymmetric Warfare Group. I have no idea what that process looks like. I'm sure if you wanted to fill us in, you could. I don't really think it's that important. I'm sure it's challenging. I'm sure it's a big kind of selection process, like everything else in the Army. And so you're at Asymmetric Warfare Group. How many more deployments did you do with them? And can you talk about the work that you were
Yeah.
doing?
So I mean, I did 3 deployments with the Asymmetric Warfare Group. I got there towards the end of their time, right? Their tenure. So uh, again, that was actually one of the hardest things for me. I was already, I mean, I'd done 6 years of first sergeant time, and
Jesus.
I was I was burnt out. Um, and a lot of things happening in the house, so for me, like, there was no downtime. I mean, I had to be switched on the whole time I was home. um, to deal with situations there, uh, and then switched on at work because again it was people were expecting high performance, and I was just eroding. Um, and so I did 3 deployments with them, and I was like, I need to retire. Like I cannot. Uh, just looking at the uniform, I'd be in the shower and I'd be looking at the uniform. I'd be like, fuck, I gotta put that on. I need to put that on today. And so, I mean, anybody that knew me before then would be like, like, hey, are you all right in there? Because I was one of those guys. I could, I could hit a shower, get out, get between my toes and everything else within 5 minutes and be out and about. And
Yeah, you can compartmentalize everything. Got a job to do. I'm going to go do the job to the best of my ability. I'll deal with myself
right.
later.
And my showers were taking like 45 minutes to an hour.
Because you really didn't want to go put that. I mean, you were at burnout, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, the Rich Mulder in the first episode of this show says that he believes that there is no person more resilient than an American infantryman in the world, and he maintains that. I tend to agree with him, and that speaks to the degree of resiliency we as infantry soldiers have, particularly going through multiple deployments like you had been on. And so, for you to be taking 45 minutes in a shower, I assume you're probably E8,
I
E9
was
at
an
this
E9.
time, right? So you're an E9, you're a sergeant major. There's nowhere else for you to go. You've achieved the highest enlisted rank that there is. Obviously, by title, that's not true, but you've displayed remarkable resilience until this point, and it even got to you because the op tempo was too much. The home life was suffering, and I think that's stuff that's not talked about enough in our community. And I think it's a lot of what is plaguing the mental health of the community. And so, you know, you made the decision to retire. I kind of had wondered if 30 years is forced retirement for enlisted guys, right? You
Uh,
cannot go more than 30.
well, it's 30 for the most part. Um, they got a waiver and a exception for everything. So,
So if you're motivated, you
right.
could
So because
stay
it
for
was,
more.
first of all, I had the 6 years reserve time, so they could just wipe that out. Um, I had a Ranger tab, which the Army can be like, all right, we'll add 2 years to that. So now you're looking at, I could have done another 8 years, possibly. I could not have done another 8 years though.
Right. You're already looking at the uniform and you said in the shower, fuck, I got to put this on. I don't have a choice, right? Like there's no choice, but I know I have to do this and this isn't sitting well with me. And so you've made the decision to retire. And I can't imagine that that's an easy decision for you because you are more institutionalized than anyone that I've talked to on this show to this point. You have the longest time in service of anyone that I've talked to right now. And I know for me, I joined at 17 and 12 and a half years, I'm 30 years old when I'm getting out. My entire identity is wrapped up on everything the Army taught me that I knew about myself. It's all related to the Army. So I'm completely lost. Can you talk about your transition and how lost were you?
So when I transitioned out, I had the original plan. Um, obviously there had been several plans through the years. Like I'm going to do this. I'm going to hop on my Harley. I'm going to roll across the USA, smoke cigars, and drink beer, and you know, be a be a drag on society. Um,
I think we all say that and then we get out and we don't have it in us to actually live that kind of
right.
life. Like we just don't know how to do that.
Um, so and then of course, by this point, I'm now a father. Um, so what I wanted to do was I was like, I am going to go out to California, excuse me, join this outdoor leadership school, and I am going to use my GI Bill to be uh, a mountain leader and you know lead lead expeditions across the globe and all these visions of grandeur. Um, and my ex-wife is like, hey, no, like, let's take it back a notch, you know, like, you we need you home. Okay.
Yeah, you've been gone
Yeah,
enough.
because
It's
I mean,
time for you to be
when I was
present
in
now.
Asymmetric Warfare Group, I was, you know, gone for a week, home for the weekend, gone for a week, home for the weekend, gone for the week, home for the weekend, maybe home for a week, then gone for the weekend, you know, and then, or 2 weeks. And, so I was probably out of the 3 years I was there, I probably had like less than 6 months actually at home.
Which doesn't
Um,
surprise me. I mean, even in a traditional infantry unit like the 3rd ID or the 2nd ID I was a part of, between deployments, yeah, you're home in the States for 11 months, 12 months maybe, but you're really only home and able to spend any kind of quality time with your family for 3 of those months, if I had to guess, between leave and just holidays, regular holidays that they try to give you because you're just training all the time, always training. It's a 2 week field problem here, followed by a 30-day, mandatory. You got to go to the box to NTC to check the block that you're ready to go to war. I mean, it's always something. So you had the plan, and you're going to be this mountain leader, travel the globe, delusions of grandeur, I think, as you called it. So what happens there?
so, she says, let's kick it back a notch. You've been gone for years. You, we need you home.
And did you feel like that was a reasonable request at the time?
Yes. I mean, because it was 6 months just for the school where I would be gone.
Right, and you're already gone for the last 3 years, essentially, so she's like, "No, thank you. I need you here. It's our turn," kinda thing, which is very common for anybody who has, I would say, a career longer than maybe 7 or 8 years in the Army. That's very much the case is, you know, family issues, influence the decision to get out or retire, trying to keep things together, and the request comes to, you need to be home, right? We have kids and you need to be a part of this. I'm tired of doing this by myself, kind of situation. I imagine that's what you're getting
Right.
from your ex-wife, right?
So I said, okay, I gotcha. And so then about a month before I retire, just doing research, I realized that the local community college has essentially the same thing. It's just spread out, and you're doing a lot of the classes in the classroom, but they have a outdoor leadership course in the local college. Okay, so I put in for that. I get everything straight, uh, and about a week before it starts, she's like, "I don't think you should do that." I'm like, like, why not?
What do you mean?
She's
Yeah,
like, "Why don't
right.
you take a
Like,
break? Why don't you give yourself 6 months, and you can start in January?" So we went back and forth. And finally, I was like, "Okay, fine. You know, I'll wait." And then a month later, I retire. A month later, I want a divorce.
so now your whole transition plan is fucked. And how do you take that? What happens?
Well, I mean, I was less than happy, um,
Of course.
and so one thing leads to another. I find out she wants to go move in with this guy. You know that obviously they had not met the night before. Um, uh, so I, to say I was pleasant about the whole experience would be a lie. Um, However, I was never, you know, angry. Yes,
Abusive.
abusive. No. Uh,
No, of course not.
uh, and so she's like, "Well, I'm gonna take our son, and we're gonna." I was like, "The fuck you are," you know. No, you know, sideshow Bill is gonna freaking raise my son. Um, so once that became clear, I, so she moved out. She moved in with him, and now I'm a single dad. and this was, and you know, we can get into it later if you want about the whole man camp and everything else. Um,
Why don't we just get into it now?
so that when you become the sole um, caretaker of somebody else, there is no man camp in the world. I mean, I've been through, you know, basic training, AIT, you know, Ranger School, SEER School, all these other courses throughout, and nothing can prepare you for manhood as accepting responsibility for taking care of your child. 100%. I mean, you know, there's no, I mean, there's wiggle room, but it's not the same wiggle room that you had as an NCO. You know, and there's no man camp that's going to teach you, hey, dude, you know, there's no drinking beer tonight. You know, there's no being an asshole and screaming that's going to actually accomplish anything positive and worthwhile.
So in saying all of that and recognizing all of that, did it help you from maybe kind of falling as far down that dark transition hole as you probably could have? I mean, was there still maybe some drinking going on that was maybe excessive to try and escape some of the loss of identity, the 30 years that you had just given to the army, and now you have no idea what the fuck to do with your life, kind of thing? You know, especially with making plans with the ex-wife, and then, you know, you retire and she's moved in with Bill and wants to take your son, and this is all just kind of forced upon you. You recognize you can't do those things, but also you're probably looking for some kind of escape,
Right.
right?
So the escape, because like I said, I mean, there was no getting drunk, you know.
Right, and you're how old is your son at this
He is
point?
7.
So he's 7 years old. Like there's absolutely no way you can be a drunken mess or check out with drugs or whatever, because you know he basically can't take care of himself.
And so that became, that was my AA, you know what I mean? Now to say like I didn't drink on the weekends that she had him would be a lie. Um, you know,
I imagine you probably went pretty hard.
actually I went a lot less hard than I normally would have. If I,
Do you think it's because you knew he had to come back to you, right? And you had to be, you know, it's kind of like what you were talking about when you were part of the scout platoon, right? Like everybody wanted to be there, and we didn't have time for the guy who showed up drunk because he partied too hard the next week. You're just gone, right? And so keeping that mentality, right, kind of probably helped you a lot in taking on the responsibility of your
right.
son.
So I mean, whereas if I had been, a single guy that I was, before obviously him, before he was born, it would have been easy to like, you know, grab a grab a bottle of gin and just hammer away. However, that was, that's no longer there. And, like now it's, because my worry then was if at any point something happens and I need to get in the vehicle and drive to where he is, can I do that? And so I mean that was a turnaround point. Um, the other thing that really hits you hard is no one needs you. You know,
They
when
don't. They really,
when
yeah.
you shut off that military issue cell phone the last time, other than like, hey, we need you to sign this, hey, we need this, we need that, there's no phone calls. No one's calling you up. Hey, first sergeant. Hey, sergeant major. I need some career advice.
I need you to put this fire out. I need you to deal with. You're not going to believe what this soldier did. It's always something, right? Like even as a squad leader and a platoon sergeant, for me, when I got out of the army, I made it a point to turn the ringer on my phone off because I was so sick of being attached to a phone. However, I didn't realize how much I would miss that, right? Like you hate it in the moment, or you don't enjoy it. I don't think you hate it, but you don't enjoy it. You're like, fuck, I wish my phone would give me a fucking break. Like these privates are killing me. And that's obviously only amplified. I was never, never made for sergeant or anything like that, but I did work. One of my greatest mentors, my first sergeant for Afghanistan, I worked very closely with him and I helped him deal with a lot of that shit. And he would vent to me about that shit. So I can only imagine how much more it's been amplified. And now you don't have that
Yeah, I
anymore.
mean, now you're on radio silence.
And it's
Oh,
quiet,
it's
bro.
real
It's
quiet.
so
And
quiet.
you want to amplify the quiet? Go through a divorce
I, twice, been there,
and
done that.
realize that nobody really wants to talk to you because they know that you're going to call them up and bitch and moan and complain. And, you know, they're like, "Hey, I'm dealing with my own shit, dude. You know, figure it out." Um, and that was one of the hard things was realizing, hey, there's one person that can figure this out, and that's me. And that was when I really started looking at how can I do this?
So would you say that that kind of was what sparked your entrepreneurial curiosity? Or was that always kind of with you? Like when did you know you were going to work for yourself and not necessarily go work for anyone
It was
else?
about that time. I mean, I realized that, like, I need to do this myself. No one else can do it for me. Um, and I need to start looking at how I can be better because I'm a single father now, you know. And if you think you can lead a 7-year-old kid the same way you do an 18-year-old private, you're in the wrong business. I mean,
So so did you have career options? I imagine as an E9 sergeant major coming out, with 30 years, you probably have quite a few options for employment in the corporate world,
right.
right? And so I know you wanted to go be, a mountain guide and that's what your first plan was. And then you found out the local community college did the same thing over a longer period of time. And so you kind of shift your plan to that. Did you ever consider just going from the army straight into one of those careers? If you did or didn't, why or why
Um,
not?
I did not. I did not want to be in one of those typical post-army contractor, wearing 511 pants and a black polo.
Right. The opportunity we all got during that time period, right? Like I had the same thing. I'm getting 100% from the VA, and they still want me to come work for Triple Canopy. I'm like, I just got done doing this shit. I don't want to go do it. I don't care what the money is, you
Right.
know.
I was like, no, thank you. Um, so that was what what actually drove was when I started going through the healing process. Um, and
So let's talk about that because the healing process is super important, and I just went through it like really intensive 10 months ago in July of last year. And I had the cheat code in the ayahuasca experience to really wake me up and turn my life around. But it's possible to heal without plant medicine. And, plant medicine only shows you where you can go. You still have to do the work. And so by doing the work, I mean, probably a lot of the techniques that you used to start your healing journey. Because we did, I don't know if I asked you or not, but you haven't had a psychedelic experience, right? Yeah. So you started the healing journey. What did that look like for you? Because to me, this is what this show is for. This is what veterans need to hear. If you're sitting on the couch doom scrolling and having pity for yourself and blaming your army experiences for the position that you're in now, this is the shit you need to pay attention to, because this is how you get better and life improves for you.
So what I did, I first of all, I met with a fellow vet he was starting off his journey as a peer coach for the vets. Um, he'd only done like 3 years, and it was one of those like, I'll help him out. And then like I was like, hey, this is good shit. Like this is actually helping me a lot. And I was like, where did you learn this? And he's like, well, it's called the enlifted method, and I can give you Mark England's phone number. And he's been traveling the world doing this stuff. And so he gives me his phone number. I went through the course myself, um, and it basically it teaches you how to walk your own road.
And what was the name of the
The
method again?
enlifted method,
The enlifted method. Got it.
Enlifted. Um, and it's it's imagine motivational interviewing, um, journaling, and breath work all superimposed on each other.
And every technique or tool that I've learned involves elements of all three of those things. For me, particularly the breath work is amazing. I don't know how you feel about
Yeah,
the breath work. I
absolutely.
know it was weird when I first started it, and I was very skeptical, woo woo. And then, boy, I implemented a breathing practice just to keep me grounded. So when I feel super stressed or like I'm spiraling, I just return to my breath and it fixes everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and the other part of the enlifted method is the language. The lang
So practicing changing your internal monologue, correct? The way we communicate to
Right, our
ourselves.
self-talk. So we all have, so you take it in three. There's three different distinct fields of talk. You've got the talk that your self-talk, which is the most important. Your talk with your partner and your peers. So your personal, you know, conversations. And then you have your professional talk. In the army, in the military, we have very positive, strong professional talk. Adam, I want you to take those three soldiers. I want you to go over to the motor pool, report to Sergeant Cook, and I want you to do wherever he says for the next 3 hours. Be back no later than 1200 hours. Any questions?
Roger that, Sergeant Major.
Any questions?
Roger
You,
that, Sergeant Major. On the way.
task and purpose. You're on it, and you're very clear about what the fuck you want, when you want it done, and how, and if you have to, how it's got to get done.
Yeah. Everything. Tasks, conditions, standards, everything.
Now, if I walk up to, one of my buddies, hey, Adam, I'm not going to lay it out on the line like that for you. You're going to be like, hey, dude, fucking go pound sand. you know, if, hey, Adam, I need to ask you for a favor, and what I want is this, and this. Do you believe you could help me? And, obviously there's pleases and there's thank yous in there. Um, and you're either going to be, you know, yes, I can help you, or no, I can't. Uh, you know, it it lays out what you want. It's the same thing, the task, purpose, condition, and standard.
Yeah. Task, conditions,
But
standards.
I'm
Right.
I'm being pleasant. I'm asking, and if I
It's coming more from a point of I'm a decent human to you. I'm asking you if you will do something that's decent as a human for me versus the dynamic in the army is you're a fucking sergeant major and I don't have a choice. I'm going to do what you say to the best of my ability because if not, you're going to scuff me up, right? Like it's really that
Right.
simple.
Now, the other way I could come up that you hear many people do nowadays is, "Hey, Adam, man, do you think it would be possible if you could come over here and maybe help me with some hard work around the house? You know, it'd be really cool. I'm a good guy. Can't you help me?" You know, you'd be like, "You fucking, yeah, you need to do it yourself, you weak ass bitch." You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right. And I think a good example, we can use the way that you and I met as an example. I made a post in a Facebook group that you're a part of, and I thought it was a pretty professional post. It was, looking for guests to come on this show, veteran entrepreneurs. I laid out what my mission is, kind of, I don't even remember now. You might remember better than I did, but obviously it resonated with you because you responded. I think very promptly I responded back to you like, "Hey man, I'm super grateful that you answered the ad. This is how I would like to do business. Can we jump on a 30-minute get to know you call? I'll tell you more about what the show is about. And if we vibe, you can come on the show. I'd love for you to be a guest." Right? Like that's the kind of
Right.
professionalism you're talking about, right?
And then all right, so there's that. Imagine if you will, you walk up to a girl, all right, you know, first time you met your wife. "Hey, do you think maybe we could possibly go out for uh maybe we could get together for a movie or something sometime?" You know, the chances of her being, "Oh, yes." Probably
Pretty
right.
slim.
Whereas
Yeah. Because you're very like not confident
right,
about how
and
you're
you're very
asking, right?
non-committal, whereas, "Hey, I would like to take you out to dinner. Do you think that's possible?"
Does 8 o'clock
Right.
tomorrow night
Yeah.
work?
"Do you think that's
Right.
possible this
Yeah.
weekend? Okay, what about next weekend? Can we do" so when you start throwing in all those filler words and the soft talk, like, the maybes, probablys, you know, eh, we have a tendency to push back on people like that because there is a lack of confidence.
I feel like it's almost like I don't know. I'm very direct. I have been my whole life. It's kind of something that I'm having to work on. Going through the psychedelic integration and addiction recovery coaching course is learning how to talk to people of different walks of life. I particularly want to work with veterans, more specifically combat veterans, just because I know how to talk to them, right? And I know that my coaching style, my directness is what resonates with them. But I know that being part of, being true to use psychedelic integration, like list of people who can be a coach, I'm going to have all kinds of different people to deal with, right? And so I just have to learn how to be direct, but in a kind of toned down way. Does
It
that make
does
sense?
because I'm the same way where, "Hey, Adam. Hey, dude, I want to go play football. You want to come with me?"
Yeah, let's
You
go.
know what I mean?
Right.
And that was one thing when I retired. I was very direct with people, and a lot of the local people, civilians, be like, it's kind of rubbing me the wrong way. And again, I was institutionalized, so there was, when I said something, people listened. And also, I was a child of the '80s where that was commonplace, where there was a whole lot of direct talk. It was that whole Valley Girl era going into the '90s and the 2000s where it seemed people started being indirect with what they actually wanted. Um, so the Enlifted method goes through all that, and that's something that I use when I do my peer coaching. Is that type of coaching, which is different than my nutrition coaching. And then when I'm doing kettlebell coaching, it's very direct. Okay, I need you to do this because you will get hurt if you do not.
Right, right. It's yeah. And so the enlifted method, when he gave you the phone number, you at that point decide like, yes, this is what I want to do for a living. This is how I think I can earn money.
Uh, what I saw it as was this is something that veterans need, and the the challenge has been uh, getting veterans to understand that this will help them. I mean, I if I had it my way, every squad leader and platoon sergeant, first sergeant would be qualified on the enlifted method in the Army because that would solve so many problems for leaders, uh, combat vets. There's it has so much spillover. And one of the things that when I work with combat vets is when you hear people, "Oh, I keep talking to my therapist. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough." And I'm like, "Dude, you've been on the verge of a breakthrough for fucking 5 years." You know, I work with guys and they're breaking through after 3 sessions. You know,
But it's because of the tools that you're able to present them with. And I what you just said resonates with me to my core because that's why I started this show. I, like you, believe veterans need to hear this shit. Like they need to hear this shit. And I believe by getting this in front of as many of them as we can kind of start to eliminate that problem of getting veterans to understand that this is what they need and that this shit does work. Right. And so I relate to your problem because there is pushback. But it's also, kind of my vision for the strategic veteran is inspired by the Allegiant Vets Skill Bridge program. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a 6 month kind of career track that prepares them and really sets them up to get a corporate job in stuff like UI, UX design, project management, digital marketing, human resources. I think there's like 12 total tracks. I don't remember all of them. But I started thinking, like, you know, some of the happiest veterans I know are guys who started businesses after they went through their transition and the dark periods of time. And so I started thinking about it for myself. Like, I enjoy this. I want to get out of bed and do this every day. I don't have that moment like you were having at the end of your time in service where you're in the shower looking at the uniform like, fuck, I got to put this on, right? Like the hardest part of my day is being a little nervous. Like I was a little nervous to interview you and talk to you this morning. Like you're somebody that I have mad respect for. 30 years, Sergeant Major, like you reached the top, you did it all. And I kind of envy that. I really respect that. I know what that was like for you because we served the same time period, right? Like 2003 to 2015 was me. You were obviously way longer than that, but I know what that is. And so I I want to create a program 10 to 15 years in the future. Obviously this is very new, but that really kind of shows veterans a 6 month path to entrepreneurship where maybe, yeah, you're not making money, but you have all the things in place so that when you do get out, you can continue to focus on something that I believe will fulfill you and give you purpose for the rest of
right.
your life.
Yeah, I think well, for veterans, the biggest thing that we have going for us is we are able to instill discipline in ourselves with no second thought. Um, what did I do before? So, I wake up, I get to bring my son to school, you know, every morning, rain or shine. I get to load him up in a car at 6:45 and we drive over to school. And, those 10 to 15 minutes in the car are crucial because he gets so much out. And, sometimes it's just a a lot of goofing off in the car, listen to, like, hey, I want to listen to this crazy song. So he turns it on. There's other times where like he gets into some deep questions about life, you know. eh,
And it's your, like, you get to do that because of the path you've chosen to take, right? And you get to be present for your son every day instead of, oh, sorry son, you're going to have to get on the bus cuz I got to go to this corporate job. I got to be there at 6. I won't be home till 8. Oh, and by the way, dinner is kind of on you. I know you're only 12, but this is kind of the way it is right now, right? Like that's not a way. You don't want to live that way. And he doesn't deserve to have to live
right.
that way.
And so, then after I get home, you know, I, on the days that I'm working out, I work out when I get home. You know, uh, yeah, I'll sit down and have a cup of coffee and, you know, do do a couple other things, but I get my workout in, and then, it's 9 o'clock and I'm eating breakfast and working on other things. So, that's it's something that I can force myself, and it's not even force is a hard word. Um, it's something I guide myself to do every morning. Like, right. And you know, I would prefer working out at 6:30 in the morning, you know, but there's a payoff there. Do I want to work out while he has to ride a bus with a bunch of shitheads? Or, you know, do I take him to school and spend some quality time with him? He already takes the bus home, so because that was like he wanted to do that, like ride the bus.
That was a compromise between the two of you, right? Like, because he's probably not always thrilled. Hey, dad's taking me to school, right? He probably probably some times where he's a little pushback there, like, Dad, do we
Uh,
have to? I don't
It's
want to go to
it's
school
not
with you
so
or
much
whatever.
that, but he gets to hang out on the bus after school and goof off and, you know, be a
Be a
kid,
kid.
without having to wait in line. Plus waiting in line to pick up from school is a whole different ball game than dropping off. 'Cause,
I believe it. I see the lines
yeah,
around here, and I'm like, no, thank
um,
you. I don't want to
so
do that.
he gets home faster if he takes the bus than if he, unless I show up an hour early and beat all the other parents there, then I'm sitting in a car for an extended period of time. So it just works out best.
So you discover the enlifted method. You saw how much work it did for you, and you just decided, yes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help my community, a community I'm part of that's very near and dear to me, and I'm going to implement this into some kind of peer coaching program, right? And did you have any fear about that? Like, can I make this work? Like, can I actually make money doing this and sustain me and my son?
So, I mean, I get lucky. I've got retirement. Um, and the the fear for me, uh, I would say, wasn't fear was not something that I focused on. So what I focused on was my fear was, can I actually help people? You know, and you know when I've coached guys that were they had been telling themselves a story from, it was June 21st, uh, in the Wanat Valley, and we had been getting, attacked every morning at 6:30. And I woke up one morning and I told myself I'm going to die today. And, you know, that is one of those things where you write out, you got a headline, like like a story to a chapter to a book, and you just have them write it all out, and then you just start working on the language. You're not changing what they're saying, you're changing the way it's said.
Yeah, you have to change the way they
And,
perceive it,
you know,
right?
so at the end of all this, this guy was a stud, and he hadn't been able to hold the job for 3 years. He kept, showing up drunk and getting, told to go home, and finally people would kick him out and he'd lose his job. And then after all this, after 3 sessions, this guy's like, his whole life changed. I mean, this guy's like, "I'm alive. I'm fucking alive." He goes out, gets himself a job as a welder, works as a welder in this one shop for 6 months, gets a job as a welding lead. Now he's running his own welding shop with like 30 welders in there.
All because you sat him down and did the hard work with him. 3 sessions. That's amazing, man. Congratulations. And that obviously did something to you on the inside, I can imagine, right? Because I know when people come back to me after an hour long just discovery call and we unlock some things for them and they just take massive action and they're like, shit, this shit really works. And that's the greatest feeling in the world to get those messages in my inbox. Hey, like, because of what you talked to me about, I am now doing X, Y, and Z, and I've never been happier. And it's like, holy shit, this is
Yeah,
awesome.
I've worked with lieutenant colonels that that they're institutionalized, and they got a stiff upper lip, and next thing you know, they're like, "Damn, like this really helped me out." And
Yeah.
again, it's one of those things we get so ingrained into the military community that when we get out, we think, we're unable to peel, like, is this layer of the onion needed? No. Is this one needed? Oh, that's a useful layer. I'm keeping that one. You know, you
Yeah, we haven't learned the reframing techniques. Right? I really like to. I'm big into mindset because so much of building a business is mindset, and I really think for good reason the army keeps you in this fixed mindset, right? Like I have to take care of everyone else before I take care of myself. Mission first, men second, right? Army third, and then maybe me and my family somewhere down the road or whatever. And so much of being happy in life and living a fulfilling life is getting out of the fixed mindset and learning how to live and develop the growth mindset. And when you unlock that, it's like a superpower. I swear it's the most incredible experience that I have ever personally had is flipping that switch from a true fixed mindset to a true growth mindset. And I don't mean like half ass. I mean like actually living with that purpose every single day, getting up, reframing undisciplined thoughts, you know what I mean? Analyzing, you know, those demons inside of you. It's incredible. And so when did you switch or add the nutrition piece? Because a lot of people don't understand what you put into your body, particularly how connected your gut is to your mental health. And I knew that's why you added that piece because I assume at some point you learned about gut health and how connected it is to everything within our bodies. And so, what made you add that piece, and what success and I guess just what changes are you seeing in your clients by adding that piece and combining it with the enlifted
so
method?
with the gut health, that was something I learned when I went for my master's. So, because it was a mental health and wellness course. And then after that, I I had my just a basic sports nutrition certification. And I thought, how am I going to do something good here, for more than just veterans, um, for the good of everybody, or basically the whole family. What can I do that's good for the whole family? Well, nutrition, I you step out into the supermarket and you can look around and say, "Oh, we need some help." Um, it doesn't take any serious investigation to figure that out, looking at the population. Um, and not just, and I'm not talking about, you know, you see somebody that may be chubby or whatever you want to say, but you're like,
I mean, we can use me as an example, bro. When I went to Peru, I was 311 pounds. I weighed 219 pounds as of Saturday last weekend. So yeah, we can use me as an example. I lied to myself for a long time. I was like, I'm fine. I've got this under control. I'm not that big, right? Like I was telling myself a story, and you alluded to that earlier. Like your first client, he was telling himself a story, and that's not at all what the story was.
and so we'll say I look at you, okay? I can be like, all right, possibly overweight, capable of taking care of himself. You know, you could see, like, there's a difference. Like, you have you can look at somebody and be like, able to take care of himself. Then you look at somebody who may not even be anywhere near as large, incapable of taking care of himself. I mean, the way a person holds himself spells volumes, you know. And that is one thing with the health coaching. Like, how are you? What's your whole circle of health look like? And that gut health. How does that play into your mental health? How does your sleep play into your mental health and your physical health? How does your emotional health play into all those other ones? If all of a sudden you're feeling sorry for yourself, so you start stuffing horrible foods down your into you, now your gut is paying for it, and now your mental health is paying for it, and your physical health. All right, how is your social health? You know, how your social circle. We've all heard the "you are the sum of the five people you hang out with." There's some truth to that. There's some stretching on it, but there's some truth to that.
I believe that too. There is some truth to
If
that.
you're hanging out with thugs and criminals and drug dealers, then and they're constantly being chased by the police, and you happen to be hanging out with them, even though you may not be involved in those circles, you're still having that reaction being around them, and
When I think we don't even have to use an example as extreme as that. It's like if you're a motivated person, right? Like you and I trying to build businesses, coaching businesses in particular, right? And you're hanging around people who aren't interested in that or they just don't have the same aspirations. They're just comfortable with their 9 to 5 and making, $50,000 a year, but that doesn't satisfy you. You tend to want to just continue to do the same things that those people are hanging around you. And when you start to change that circle, it just kind of by happenstance, you're no longer the smartest person in the room. You're surrounded by people who are just as motivated as you, kind of like what you were saying about the asymmetrical warfare group. Those guys want to be there, right? Like there's purpose there. And you start to pick up on things and start to learn more things and you start to feel more
right,
fulfilled,
and,
right?
and you start challenging yourself. Like,
Yeah. Well, if he can do
right,
it, I can do it. If she can do it, I
if I
know
want to
I
hang
can
out
do
with
it,
this
right?
dude, I need to step up.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a little element of competition there because you want access to that circle or whatever, right? So you recognize, like you said, I have to step up. I've got to be better. How do I get better? It's just gut health and affect how everything being connected, right? And what you're talking about is very much. I met a guy on LinkedIn. His name's Matthew Banco. I had the pleasure of being a guest on his podcast, and what sparked that whole thing was we had a conversation, just a meet and greet conversation, get to know one another because we are both veterans or whatever, and he turned me on to his philosophy. We have a MEPS to get in the Army, and he it was either him or a guest he had on his podcast that kind of pointed this out. But there should be kind of a MEPS to get out, and by that I mean MEPS can stand for mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual, because those are the big five areas of yourself that you really have to do deep work on in order to get through the healing process. Would you agree
Absolutely.
to that?
Um, and the other thing I look at is the environment. Like, so basically your friends, your social circle, a lot of times that chooses the environment you're engaging in on a
Right.
daily basis. And you read like Jordan Peterson, what's one of the things, you want to change who you are, change the way you clean your room, make your bed,
Okay.
you know,
Right. Every
right.
morning
You
still.
know, do you know, if you're not even bothering to take a shower, you know, then that's gonna play into your whole well-being sooner or later. Um, and then, spiritual or existential, like what's waking you up in the morning, you know, is is being a good role model to your kids what's waking you up. You know, if you can't even get up for that, then maybe it's time to seek help. Like if you're having a hard time motivate yourself to show your kid that this is what I can do and you can do it too, then it's time to relook, refocus, and recharge that aspect of our lives.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So this is kind of becoming my favorite part of the show. We've got some questions from actual listeners of the show. These ones come from a good buddy of mine, Kyle Kushner. He wanted to serve, but was talked out of it by his parents. So he's got mad respect for the military. He's helped me with a lot of things along my journey, given me a lot of solid advice. So his first question for you is what were some of the most significant challenges that you faced on active duty compared to the challenges that you are facing after active duty?
Uh, the challenges on active duty was a you basically had like a bulletized list of things that could be accomplished in order to accomplish something else. So if you want to get promoted to staff sergeant by 6 years in the army, then you knew that these different levels had to be, those steps had to be made.
Yeah,
Right,
there's a roadmap. The Army literally gives you a roadmap
right.
for how to do it.
But when you get out, there's a roadmap to them signing your papers. So basically, most of the time when you get out of the army, it's designed for that private that was in there for 3 years and just wants out. So it's a roadmap to getting the hell out. There's no roadmap. They don't do a whole lot for, let's look at your next decade after this.
Which I think is part of why the transition is so rough, because we dedicate so much of our lives. The Army is who we are, it's what we know, it's what we've done, you for 3 decades. And then you really quickly find out how little the Army cares about you. You're just a last name and a number to them. Even Sergeant Major Burnah was a number. Like it's he's not immune. It, it's insane. That's a great answer to that question because I totally agree with it. His next question for you is: did your service help you be able to navigate the later challenges more, or did it hinder your ability to navigate the challenges? Did you get too set in your ways? I think is kind of what he's asking, to be able to handle appropriately.
Um, I'm trying to to set my ways after my service.
Y- Yeah, did it help you navigate the later challenges? So assuming those challenges that you spoke to active duty, right? So, you know, they don't give you a roadmap. They give you a roadmap to getting your DD 214, and then they don't give a shit about you, right? So, do you think that your time in service helped you prepare and be able to navigate it better, or do you think it was kind of a detriment to your ability to
Uh,
adapt?
I would say That's a two-part answer. Okay. First bulk of my service was a detriment. Um, and I've said this before to other people. I really needed the Asymmetric Warfare Group more than they needed me. You know, again, it was a rough time for me. However, they helped with understanding like what the civilian process was like because a lot of times they wanted you to go in there and present a more of a professional businessman type attitude or
So you're putting down the fatigues for a suit and
right.
tie type of
They
deal.
want you to look like a
Yeah.
professional, you know, that's a professional can walk into any room and people are like, all right, that guy's got his shit together. They may not be like, oh, I didn't realize he was military, but they look at you and they're like, that guy's got his stuff together. And so again, when you're around people like that, and a lot of them were retirees who are now, they're contracting because they're still looking to have a little fun and but they're a lot of those guys are running their own businesses on the side. So they're retirees. They're working for the Asymmetric Warfare Group as a contractor. And, there's guys that they're running beauty salons, and you get some guy with a 20-inch neck and a 48-inch chest that, you know, they they
Cutting
can
hair.
they can kick in a door and take out everybody in there. And, he's pleasantly leading a bunch of middle-aged women to cut hair. You know what I mean? He doesn't know anything about hair cutting himself, but he owns it and he deals with it. Um, and so, that led to me having an outlook of like, hey, there's other things out there besides contracting, and there's things that I can do for myself that are actually enjoyable.
So you got like a a front row seat to what is possible, particularly entrepreneurship, right? Because you're with this group of guys or people in general who are building things on the side while doing another job. So that just opens your mind to what is actually possible. And I think a lot of veterans, with their time in the military, they're not exposed to that. They don't know that that is a possibility. At least that's the feedback I get. When I presented, they're like, overwhelming number of messages saying, "Hey, like I didn't even know this was a possibility. You just opened a door I didn't know existed." And I think that's super cool, man, that you got to have that experience with Asymmetric Warfare Group. So I can definitely see how the earlier part of your career, was a detriment, but then being an Asymmetric Warfare Group really set you up at the end of your career to know what direction you needed to go. That's awesome. His next question, this is probably one of my favorite questions. What do you feel is the most significant mental health challenge facing our veterans today?
Uh, Loneliness.
Yeah, I would
Um,
agree.
you know, Again, like we were talking about earlier in the show, you are, especially for senior leaders, you are the end all be all. People are, they're relying on you. That phone's buzzing. It's ringing. You're getting text messages in the middle of the night. You're getting phone calls in the middle of the night. You got 5 text messages first thing in the morning. Um, you've got emails coming through. I mean, you are more connected than a mafia don. Um,
I like that. That's a good one.
and there's a reason why a lot of times they call the first sergeant, the local shot caller, because that's really what you are. I mean, you know, if it goes by the first sergeant without his approval, woe be it to you. You know what I mean? And again, I had 6 years of first sergeant time, so you know, if somebody went over my head and never even gave me a chance to crack that nut, you can bet they were going to hear from me fairly shortly thereafter. Um, and and now you're, unless you've developed the idea of I am somebody before you get out, the world is going to tell you very quickly that you are nobody. And
That's powerful, brother, because that's
if
so
you
true.
are unable to face that on your own, that you are somebody, because you are, you know, there's a saying, to the whole world, you're a nobody, or to the whole world, you're one person, but to one person, you're the whole world. You know, there's there's a lot of saying, there's a lot of truth in that. You know, you, you know, when you've got kids, you're the whole world, or at least you're half of it because of the other parent, you know. And if you allow yourself to just fall into this hole of nothingness, then that's what you'll become, and it's kind of like a giant ship. You're gonna be sucking in a whole lot of other people with you who don't need to get sucked in, and you could have prevented it by realizing that you're pretty fucking important.
I love that answer, man. That's such a great answer. And I think I relate to it a lot because, and I'm sure you might be able to relate to this. I'm sure that you still have guys that you mentored while you were in that may still be in progressing with their careers that still reach out to you almost. I know I have one or two, three really that reach out to me all the time, and I'm shocked. I feel like I don't deserve it, but I think for me, that's what really kind of kept me. I was deep in that dark hole, and I think that's what kept me from falling all the way into the bottom. Is those guys would reach out for advice, and I'm like, I don't feel worthy of it, but like also I was still, at the peak of my leadership in the army when I started mentoring these guys, so I owe it to them to continue to do the best I can. And I do have a little bit of regret for falling into that hole and maybe not doing so well, but also that kind of gets squashed by everything that I'm doing now by just being an example and standing up for the community. And when they call me and they point out like, hey, you may not be in the army anymore, but this is why we look up to you because look at what you're doing. You're still being a leader, right? Like that really helps get you through it. And I love your answer to that because loneliness, it really becomes very lonely. You feel like the whole world can't relate to you. You fall. It's awful. It's an awful, awful feeling. Um, and the last question, unless you've got more to add to that, the last question from Kyle, and I think this is a really, really good one because even me, I don't think I realized how much support there is out there from the civilians for military right now. And it runs so deep, it's not even funny. But he says, how can civilians or non military and those who can't completely understand or empathize with the challenges we've faced, how can they best assist the community?
Uh, I think best assist the community. Um, okay, and this may come off as harsh, is when someone starts off a conversation with "Thank you for your service." For me, that's it feels almost like a brush off. Um, and like, okay, I was in my service. However, I'll usually no, thank you. You know, because we don't a lot of times we join the army, we don't think about like the afterthoughts. Like it's kind of like walking by a doctor or a school teacher. Hey, thank you for doing your job. You know,
Yeah. I I relate to that a ton. I've always felt guilty for even speaking out about it, but it makes me extremely uncomfortable when people just find out you're a veteran and thank you for your service. And I'm not one to go around like, "Hey, I'm a veteran," like any of that shit. I very just not me. That's just not what I do. But when they find out, it's thank you for your service. I'm so grateful for what you did. I have mad respect for what you did. Like, I'm just like, you realize I volunteered for this. Like, I signed the contract and continued to sign the contracts. Like, I don't. I don't know. It really is a really weird feeling, and I agree with you. It's
You know, I
strange.
I look at it as, say, you don't walk by a guy that walks dogs in the city for a living and be like, "Hey, thanks for walking those dogs." You know,
But
I mean,
yeah, right,
uh,
and I know it's almost like you said. It sounds harsh to be that way, but like it's a very real feeling that we as
right,
veterans
and
have.
there's no obviously we're not looking for them to like be cruel to us either or rude. It's yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of it makes you feel funny. Like now all of a sudden you're on a on a right, and um, the other thing is if you got a friend that's a veteran, understand that it's okay to just shoot, you know, your buddy a text. Hey, how's it going? Is there anything you want to talk about today? I mean, if you do it like every day, it's gonna fucking get annoying. But
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with checking
yeah,
in
I
once every
mean,
couple weeks,
every
right? Like I haven't heard
yeah,
from you in a while.
because even other veterans need to start doing that with each other. You know, how you doing, bro? I mean, the number of times I sent that text out and gotten a heartfelt, dude, thank you so much. No one ever contacts me. I'm here by myself. It's like, oh, you know, hey,
That's
yeah,
not a good situation. Like let's do
you
this
want to jump on
more.
a call?
Call me. Let's yeah.
Because and if you think about it, how many times have you been sitting there like, "Yeah, I really wish somebody would fucking contact me."
I still get like that from time to time. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be, but what I've started doing is whenever I start feeling like that, I go through my contacts and who have I not talked to? Yeah, I just reached out to a really good mentor of mine not too long ago, and I was like, "Hey, man, I was just sitting here pretty lonely thinking about you, and I wanted to let you know I'm super grateful to have served with you, and you meant a lot to me, and this is what you did for me, man. I can't tell you how." You know much good that did for that person and for myself. You know what I mean? Just because I reached out of the blue and thanked him for the lessons that he taught me and let him know I was thinking about him. Dude, it's so important. And I think to your point and to answer Kyle's question, I think if you know someone who's military, like you were saying, reach out to them. Just like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. I wanted to check on you. Is there anything you need to talk about? Get off your chest. I'm here to listen. That's so awesome. Um, Looking ahead, what are your goals and aspirations? What does the next 3 years look like for you? And what are you hoping to
So
achieve?
the next 3 years is continuing to help. I want to help more people. Um, and what would be great is if I was able to transition from helping individuals to helping groups.
I love that. I'm a big proponent of group
Um,
coaching.
and I'm no longer getting any younger. Uh, However, I I would like to see veterans leading young people, especially our young men who seem to be in trouble these days. With the fatherlessness, the what the either perceived or real, the attacks on masculinity. Um, and short answer is, when we start seeing people that want to chop their young men off at the knees, um, and change the way they are, we need people who are willing to come to that door in the line of fire and save the other people on the other side of that door. And a lot of people have this concept of, well, I don't want my son to do it. Well, you know, I'm a little bit more old school in that speech by JFK. That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, means a lot to me. And if when you get older, if there's no more young men out there kicking in the door and, your 30-year-old son is now shaking in his boots next to you, who's unable to, because you've lost your vision and your strength, who's going to save you? And, you know, my my idea would be if people aren't going to join the army, they should do something where they become physically and mentally hardened. Um,
There's something to that. Doing something hard and really pushing yourself to find out what you're capable of, whether that be, basic training or I don't know, I don't know what the civilian equivalent of basic training would be, but just doing something hard to kind of, I don't know, welcome you into what life is like as an adult, right?
something of service. So I mean, a young man that joins the Peace Corps to go down and dig ditches and wells in Mozambique is he's doing something of service, and that's hard. You know, digging holes in a 100% humidity zone at 130 degrees, that's hard.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said about that, and I've said it several times, and I'll continue to say it. Is I feel like, and I actually, this is becoming like a hard line for me. Everybody says they join the military for a number of reasons, but I really think at the core of it, what it is it's that service aspect of it. You're serving something bigger than yourself, and again, I think that feeds perfectly into my philosophy of the path back to purpose for veterans being through entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is about service to others. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're starting, it always starts serving others. You identify a problem that a specific niche has, you solve that problem for them, and then you charge them money for it, right? So you're serving yourself and them by, making some money to create something that solves a problem that they need to solve. And you can do that and be a decent human at the same time, right? And it fills your cup but also does something nice to help improve someone else's life, which fills your cup even more, you know. And I just love that. Have you given any thought to what kind of program that you would like to try and build or implement for
So
young men?
I would like the Army leadership reaction courses. So something utilizing that same methodology, the leadership reaction course, and it may be a month long of, every morning you're waking up, you're gonna either go for a run, do some push-ups, do some sit-ups, throw a ruck on, do a ruck, um, put on boxing gloves, step into the ring for a couple minutes. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, like just learning the old one too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Learning what it feels like to get punched in the mouth, because I really do believe society has a big problem with that right now. You can sit behind a keyboard and say whatever you want, but when the rubber meets the road, are you really going to say
Right.
that to me?
And
you
and
know?
that's one thing. Like my son takes Muay Thai, and one day the coach was like, "All right, get in the ring." Well, he was 11 years old in the ring with a 14-year-old, and this kid's quite a bit older and bigger than him. And all I see is my son continuing to, I mean, he's getting wore out, because the kid's faster and stronger, but he just keeps going forward, and he's trading blows. And I was like, "Well, how'd you feel?" He goes, it wasn't that bad. He's like, it scared me at first, and then he hit me, and I realized I can take it. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome, man. I think martial arts is, I grew up like you as a wrestler, right? And then football and track as well, but particularly wrestling. And I always wanted to be in martial arts. And as soon as I had a spine surgery in January, so I'm trying to take care of that, but I want to get into jujitsu, when I'm healed enough that I'm not at risk of another herniation or whatever. And I think it's super important. If you start your kids early, they will learn discipline, right? And they will learn adversity and problem solving skills, because that's how it works. You're an 11-year-old, you're going to go up against the 14-year-old, right? Like, it's just going to happen. And I think that's awesome, man. That's great. What advice do you want to give to veterans transitioning out of the military, especially regarding starting their healing journey?
Uh, I would say start it while you're in, because once you get out, you don't realize how much every dime is going to count. And when you get out, and if you think, well, I'll just, I'll save this money right now for that, there's there's going to be ankle biters out there, and they're going to come. And when they start, once comes, it seems they come fast and furious. Um, I would
So,
say
to expand on that advice a little bit more, I know the question I'm going to get, so Major, but where do I start? So, just real quick, where would you tell them to
I
start?
would tell them to start with someone they know that's already started the healing process, because that may be a local resource, it may be a trusted resource. It, for one of your guys, he may be like, hey, I'm going to go talk to Sergeant, you know, Peters, because he got out and he became a healer. And, I want to see how he did it. And, you might be like, after talking to him, you'd be like, whoa, that's too much for me, cowboy. Do you know somebody else? Because, it's not how I want to do it. However, that's starting the process. It's starting the dialogue, the conversation, and it's putting you in a direction.
And I'm more than happy to pick up the phone and answer that phone call to any veteran listening to this that's struggling with transition. Find me on LinkedIn, find me on Facebook, Instagram, email the strategic veteran. I will reply, I will get to you, and I will spend some time with you, because you mean the world to me. I'm a part of this community and I want to make it better. I'm sure the Sergeant Major here is probably the
Exactly.
exact same way.
I mean,
Um, yeah, you know, just final thoughts, man. Any final thoughts or reflections you'd like to share with the audience? And then let them know how they can find you, all of your programs, if they're interested in some coaching with you, if they're interested in the enlightening method and your kettlebell program. You're on what, like this 10,000 kettlebell swings in a month or something right now. I love seeing your videos on LinkedIn when the algorithm chooses to show me your
yeah.
content.
So I hit 6,000 today. So 500 swings a day for a month, for 4 days a week. Um,
What's
the
the
weight
weight?
is 24K or 53 pounds. And then interspersed in there, so you do 10 swings and then one rep of some type of exercise, like a big exercise, like an overhead press or a squat or a pull up. Um, and then 15 swings, two, let's say pull ups, then 25 swings, three pull ups, and then you hit 50 swings, and then you start back over until you get to 500. Um, and uh, yeah, so I'm at Shawn, SHAWN underscore Burnah, BURNAH, at on IG, or Shawn M. Burnah, MS, on LinkedIn. And, or you can email me at SBURNAH91 at Gmail. And that's where I'm
Awesome, brother.
located.
Well, Shawn, Sergeant Major, I really appreciate your time today. I really appreciate your insights and all the value you've provided in our community and the work that you're doing for the community. It's amazing. It, it's awesome to always see somebody who was such a dedicated leader in their service get out and continue to be that leader after they get out. And I couldn't think of somebody who's more perfect to be
All right,
doing it,
thank you,
man.
Adam. Thanks for all you do.
I appreciate the hell out of you, brother. Yeah, man. Yeah, no, this is just the beginning. I can't wait to, have you back on and catch up again here in the future and talk about everything that's been going on. But, reach out to Shawn if you're struggling. If you really want to start your healing journey, reach out to me. I can connect you with Shawn as well. Let's help each other out. Let's get better. Let's stop this suicide epidemic, because I know the Sergeant Major and I can't keep picking up our phones to dead battle buddies every fucking month. It's out of control, and it's got
Remember,
to
you're loved.
stop.
Big Sarge loves you, whether you realize it or not.
That's right. All right, guys, that's our show. Thank you so much, Shawn, for being here. I'm
Thanks,
very
Adam.
grateful for you, man. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at the Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.